А?
Что за направление?
Направление? Какое направление?
Что за направление музыки играет там?
Okay, so today I want to talk about Russia, but from a different perspective. Not so much what is right now on the news, but a little bit about how Russia was historically perceived in the West. What started my interest in Russia was reading Russian novels. I liked in particular Dostoevsky. I also liked Chekhov. Those two are my favorites, but I also read a bit of Tolstoy and Gogol and others too. But anyway, I think that still for many people their view of Russia is colored by Russian literature, which is what we know best in the West. And Russia was always this country that is part of Europe, but also not part of it. And for Europeans, for many years, Russia was basically a backwards and savage country. I think the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century was a sort of Russian golden age in the West. Not only were many Russian authors becoming famous in the West, but also many musicians like Tchaikovsky, Mussorgsky, and later Stravinsky, and of course also the Bolshoi Ballet. So during this period I think the view of Russia was much more positive than before. Maybe they were still backwards and savage, but you know, at least they had some good writers and artists and a great ballet. It all ended of course with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, when the country was behind the Iron Curtain and Russia was again the main bad guy. The Cold War view that Russians were the main enemy of the West prevailed. Now I think that this dichotomy was at least partly fake, that despite their differences, they basically had an entente or a tacit agreement to divide the world among themselves, and that the people at the top in both regimes were not in complete disagreement. But that would be the subject for a different video. During this period we have Russians as the bad guys in most American movies, usually Russian spies. But in the West, very little comes out from Russia. There are a few dissident writers like Solyetsyn and maybe Anna Akhmatova, and then in cinema Andrei Tarkovsky. I like The Mirror best of all.
Попадись ты мне.
А может, это не наш Витька? А может, он там? Может, он сгорел?
А Кланька где? А? Кланька? Кланька!
Watch a long, laborious documentary.
Then in the 90s, with the fall of the Soviet Union, a different portrayal starts. Russians are still the baddies, but now more as criminals. A new enemy appears: the Russian mafia and the Russian oligarchs. Then with the Putin years, I think at first it's not completely negative, or if it's negative, it's mostly directed at Putin himself, but not at the population. You have accusations that Russia interferes in the American elections and things like that. In the series House of Cards, there is a Russian president clearly based on Putin, while the main couple is based on the Clintons.
I'm jealous, Victor. You don't answer to anyone.
Then in 2022, with the war in Ukraine, a more negative perception of Russians starts again to appear. Although this hasn't filtered to film so much, it is very present in the public discourse. I don't know how it is now. My view of Russia is still quite outdated, I guess, and I've never visited the country. And I know very little about recent Russian literature. In cinema, I know Sakharov and Mikhalkov, maybe Alexei too. But these are all directors who mostly make, 3-hour-long black and white movies watched by 5 people. So they are only known in art cinema circles. Probably even most Russians haven't heard of them. For many people in the West, Russia is still a land populated only by savages and barbarians, and maybe bears and dancing drunks, or even drunk dancing bears. In many ways, Russia is still a big mystery to most Westerners.